gearnetwork.com.
The following is a presentation of the Gear Radio Network.
I believe it's a big challenge for our building to keep things in perspective and to, if we're going to get addicted to anything, let's get addicted to the process.
And with that, we welcome you to Trust the Podcast, powered by Better Life Than Dead and the Gear Radio Network. This is episode 79.
Episode number 69 plus 10. And that, my friends, will be the final time I do that.
And that is how you complete the shtick from start to finish.
You know what? You gotta stick to it, man. Stick it out. There'll be a payoff at the end.
Look it. Good, bad, or indifferent. That is the truth. That is no truer words have been spoken as we wrap up 2020 and roll hot and heavy into 2021. It is January 1st. We are talking Bills, the Buffalo Bills to be specific, at the New England Patriots. You can hear us on betterlivethandead.com, gearnetwork.com, and wherever else you listen to podcasts. I am Ryan Wolfe at WolfeBLTD, joined on the IndyCard Media Hotline, as I am every week, by Jon Cimino at IamJCMoney. And John, it's been a week. It has been a long month this past week, as I would like to so white manly say every so often. You know how I always will say it's been a long week this year, or a long year this week, or whatever.
You know what? Whatever it is, that is a very appropriate way to articulate the past week. Just mumbled, jumbled. Doesn't matter.
Pretty much,
totally
John and I have been passing back and forth who can deal with more crap. Something I will not be speaking about on air, but something that John mentioned that he wanted to talk about. As I'm sure everybody who has known, to start off our rundown before we talk about the Buffalo Bills, we start definitely on a somber note with the passing of AEW superstar and Rochester, New York native and very good friend of co-host Jon Cimino, Jon Huber. You may know him as Mr. Brody Lee or Luke Harper. John, I'm just going to give you the floor. Say nothing, say everything, whatever you feel like saying. Just let me know, and then we'll talk about the Bills.
Of course. I know that there's a very large contingency of listeners to this very podcast that are familiar, if not because of the fact that I have spoken of my history in pro wrestling, that they have followed me here from pro wrestling and listened to my take, knowing that there's a great deal of shtick involved, and knowing that, the whole Bills Mafia favorite Jets fan thing, it's kind of like a yuck, fun kind of thing. And we do the fun element here, but there's a lot of people that, knew of my, in-ring rivalry with the man and my friendship with the man that I spoke about. And, it was a gut punch because for us, it was unexpected. They're a very private family, regardless of the public persona. So I didn't really learn much about the death until probably about a few days later, and that sort of helped me process it a little bit. But just when you are a loss of anybody, would be devastating. Anybody that's Ryan, if thank God you're here, but if I lost you, if I lost Perez, Brandon, Eric, any of my, other close friends that I have, I would be just as devastated as I am now. But the difference between, someone like you or I, and somebody that has actual celebrity status to him, like Jon Huber did, and rightfully so, because he busted his ass for it. It made the whole week a little harder to process because so many people on so many different levels in so many areas of entertainment and sports, and just people knew the guy and and they knew that he was a good guy. The biggest thing that anybody could say about him was about him being a family man. And so my heart is just shattered at the fact that Brody and Nolan will be growing up without John. But if I can try and bring this back a little bit to kind of a funny thing, I do have a Buffalo Bills related Brody Lee story to share, and hopefully it'll even make the hardest Bills Mafia fan smile a bit, because it's a fun memory. He was not a Buffalo Bills fan at all. I hate to say that on a Bills podcast. Sorry, Bills Mafia. He was not a Bills fan at all. He in fact enjoyed trolling the very Buffalo Bills fans, members of the Bills Mafia, that myself and even you, Ryan, at times during the course of the season get on. Those unreasonable ones, where if the Bills lose a game, it's because the refs are against them. And if the Bills win the game, it was, well, they should be 16-0 anyways, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Go 1-0 in a preseason, they're punching their tickets to wherever the Super Bowl is. You know what I mean? Like those kinds. He loved to troll those Bills fans. And he did, and he and I spoke the same kind of sarcasm. So we played off of one another very well, especially on public posts. And one of the things that we used to like to do with the inner circle of the aforementioned Bills Mafia on his Facebook page, after every Bills loss, he would just simply post a comment that said, "How'd the Bills do today?" And he would not reply to anything. He just did that. And that's of fantastic. Course, I would either heart emoji or laugh emoji at it, because I knew exactly what would happen. And what he would do is he would post that status after every Buffalo Bills loss, and every diehard, like crazy Bills Mafia fan or friend that was on that list would start going nuts. And he would have about 30 or 40 comments within a matter of 10 minutes. And we would be sitting there just laughing hysterically at all of these members of the Bills Mafia trying to give Mr. Brody Lee a piece of their mind, because how dare he, as a Washington football team fan, say anything about the Bills Mafia, damn you. And he would do it after every loss that would happen. And the last one, of course, the Arizona game, he did it for that one. And, I had no idea that it would be the last time that I would see that status from him. Kind of became a tradition kind of thing. He knew I did the podcast here, and, whatever. It was all fun and games. So I will say that is a tradition that I'm going to carry out, even as the co-host here. If inevitably when the Bills ever lose, just to kind of keep it going, to keep him, it's no disrespect to the Mafia. It's just to honor my friend.
Well, thankfully, this season, you don't get a lot of chances.
He was very, yeah. But on a back to a serious note, though, if anybody wants to, support the family at all, for him, there's a number of ways to do it, and I would encourage everybody. The easiest way to do it would be to go to the Brody's Pro Wrestling Tee page and buy a Brody Lee shirt. That's all. ProWrestlingTees.com/Brody Lee. There's a number of different Brody Lee shirts and pieces of merchandise on there. Even if you went to Pro Wrestling Tees and bought a CM Punk shirt or a Mick Foley shirt, because they're both in on this as well. But with any purchase from either Brody Lee's Pro Wrestling Tee store, Mick Foley's Pro Wrestling Tee store, or CM Punk's Pro Wrestling Tee store, 100% of the profit, 100% of the purchase goes to Jon Huber's family. And I'm pleased to say that they released a special edition tribute shirt for him just before his beautiful, wonderful tribute that AEW gave him last Wednesday, and it shattered all Pro Wrestling Tees records for their sales. And it would be a real a good way to make sure that Brody and Nolan, little Brody and little Nolan, and of course Amanda, his wife, his wonderful wife, are taken care of as well. So with that, I'm going to end the sad stuff here because he'd probably make fun of me and call me a bitch if he heard all this. But you know, you guys know him as Brody Lee. I know him as Huber. So safe home, Huber. And I love you and love your family. And just, we lost a beautiful man. We lost a really good one, guys.
Absolutely. And to hear all the positive stories, and that's the one thing, and I'll close on this and we can move back over to football, but they always say something along the lines of like a true measure of a man is what is said about him after they have passed. And I can't honestly remember, and it's not just because of the people around me, like you, John, we're close to him. Just the response and all the positive messages and all the positive outpouring and all the great stories that you hear from, I would say from the top down, you all the way from WWE superstars to just your random independent wrestler. Where, you know, I remember one time where you know, Brody wrestled a show in insert city here, and he was the greatest. To all the way up to, you hear stories from guys like Bray Wyatt, Braun Strowman, the New Day, guys like that, where you say, you know, you see this terrifying, this terrible, horrible, angry giant on TV who, once he walks behind that curtain, he's got a heart of gold. And like you said, he'll certainly, in the business alone, not even to mention personally, but in the business alone, I'm sure his loss will be felt for a very long time.
If anything, what I can happily say it has done is, and it sucks that it takes something tragic, because this was actually this was a tragedy. This was a tragic loss. And they're not releasing details. I know the details out of respect to the family. I'm not releasing them at all. I'm not mentioning it on air. You're not getting it from me. But I did hear the details. It definitely qualifies as tragic. But it sucks that it takes a tragedy to get a lot of people, particularly in the wrestling community, to think big picture on things. And, you know, life's too short. So if there's anything that I can give to you, Ryan, and to anybody that is listening to me falling apart and breaking up here as I'm talking, is life's too short, man. Seriously. Big picture at all. And if it was, you know, a petty disagreement over something dumb, mend that fence, man. Mend that fence, because you got to let that shit go, man. Because you never know.
Absolutely, and you don't want to have to. It just let it go. Exactly, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I guess there's no real way to transition back to football, so I'm just gonna do it. Monday Night Football. We saw first off too, John, thank you for sharing. And certainly, I know I've told you this, but sorry for your personal loss, but I appreciate you taking the time to share that with us. Obviously your family, love you, man. And, we're always here for you, especially everybody listening.
Appreciate it.
We're all here for you.
Appreciate it very much.
Even Lewis, who in his elder age, he's here.
Yeah,
for us.
Lewis is 69 plus 10 as well. All right.
Look, and I'm trying. I try. Here's the thing. I tried to stick. Right.
Good segue. That was what you got. We got it. We got it going now. Let's go. Go forward. Statistically speaking, Ryan.
Yeah, I try the shtick, but it doesn't work for me. You're the man. I'm not. I try it, and you're just like this bastard trying to steal my gimmick. Anyways, Buffalo completes the season sweep of the New England Patriots for the first time in eons, which I'll mention in a second. A 38-9 victory on Monday Night Football. You know, these games, you don't like to watch them because you're like, man, this is boring as hell. But it felt like every drive, every play, every snap, whatever, every whistle, just soaking it in, loving every single minute of it. The Buffalo Bills moved to 12-3. The first time, John, that Buffalo has won 12 games in a season since 1993. I was 2 years old. They improved to 6-2 in road games. I like to mention that because, like, it's so close to my birthday. I don't do it to be a smart ass. I'm serious. They improved to 6-2 in road games, at least 6 road wins in back-to-back seasons for the first time in franchise history. Buffalo rolls out to a 5-game win streak, the first such streak for Buffalo since they had won 6 in a row in 2004. Buffalo sweeps the Patriots for the first time since 1999, and the win marks the first time since 2000 that New England has lost to the same AFC East opponent twice in one season. Also, before we move over to our 3 big things, John, the win marks Sean McDermott's 37th win as the Bills head coach, tying him with Chuck Knox for 3rd all-time in franchise history. With that being said, Moving over to our three big things, statistically speaking, we're going to talk about Josh Allen. Like we do every week, Josh Allen, quarterback, is, if you've forgotten, 27 of 36, 320 yards passing, 4 touchdowns with 4 rushes for 35 yards. John, his 34 passing touchdowns on the season break the single-season team record for touchdown passes set by Jim Kelly in 1991 with 33. Josh Allen is the only player in NFL history to surpass 4,000 passing yards, 34 passing touchdowns, and 8 rushing touchdowns in a season. His 378 completions on the season break a franchise record set by Drew Bledsoe. He had 375 completions in 2002. Also, Josh Allen's 4,738 total yards break a franchise record set by Drew Bledsoe. He had 4,426 yards in 2002. Also, Josh Allen's 8th 300-yard passing game of the season, setting a new franchise record. Now, Josh Allen, we don't know how much he's going to play on Sunday. We'll talk about that a little later, John. But he is a handful of yards away from passing Drew Bledsoe for most passing yards in a Bills season in franchise history as well. So again, we've been witnessing the growth of Josh Allen all year, but we're getting to the point now where the season's starting to wrap up. We're getting ready for the playoffs, and Josh Allen's starting to check off all those boxes where you say, is he for real? And I mean, you don't have a season like this by accident, that's for sure.
Well, no, you don't. And again, it's one of those things where, you know, it's always been talked about where the first year to second year in the NFL is the biggest jump, is the biggest leap for young quarterbacks. And we didn't quite see that with Josh Allen yet. We saw a very slow progression, you know, first season to second season, second season, he picked it up a little bit, second season to third season, he picked it up more. I mean, and then now we have this one, this season here is just, I mean, he's been absolutely lights out. And, a lot of that has to do with the culture. A lot of that has to do with the team that they've put around him. A lot of that has to do with Stephon Diggs, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that his arm talent was always there. And everybody was saying his talent is there. He just needs to be put in the correct system. If he's not in the correct system, he's probably not going to be a very good quarterback or a very accurate one. And coming into this game, coming into this season, as I see this last piece here that you wrote here, his eighth 300-yard passing game of the season, he had 0 coming into the season this year.
I was going to say, remember when that was like a benchmark where everyone was saying,
right,
he's not for real until he does that, and now he's done it in 8 out of 15 games?
Right. It's kind of crazy there. And then that top bullet point you have there, 34 passing touchdowns as the season breaks Jim Kelly's season team record set in 1991 of 33. They did ask Jim Kelly about it, and he said, hey, if he's breaking records, that means the Bills are winning, and I'm okay with that. So it's all smiles. It's all good up in Orchard Park with this team.
I got to be honest too. It's with the Jim Kelly thing happening, with all of his records being crushed. It's very nice because, like, I understand that Bills fans love their nostalgia because that was really the only time in franchise history the team was good, with their that stretch of time with Kelly and all the other Hall of Famers that they had. It's nice to have a team now where it's like, okay, we don't always have to hear about Jim Kelly every time a quarterback plays. It's Josh Allen is the guy. He's going to be the future at quarterback. They're going to sign him to a long-term extension. Like, it's going to happen. And thankfully we can just kind of move forward from the Jim Kelly. We can leave it be. We can let it go. It can be what it was. It was great, but we don't need to be hearing about it in 2021.
Exactly. That's the thing. It's one thing if, the Kelly era, which ended in 1996 or 97, I believe, and you're still hearing about it maybe in 2000, 2001, like that type of stuff. But if you're still hearing about it in 2020, that or 2021, that's kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, so obviously there's more to this franchise than just that. There's like dysfunction, serious dysfunction. If you're constantly going back to yesteryear and saying, boy, I remember those days, like, teams should want to have those memories, but they should also want those memories to be fond memories held in the same regard as current memories. And what we're seeing now is the Bills finally making that transition to be able to have an era of football that is equal, that is equal or could possibly be greater than that particular stretch of time. That reason that particular stretch of time was looked at so fondly was because TV and cable and everything was really going it was really expanding in those years. And then you talk about internet back then as well. It once that boomed up, everything is in everybody's face all the time. But that was kind of like yesteryear. That was kind of like the glory, the final, if you will, era of a bygone era of technology. And now we're there, and now technology is so advanced that it could mean so much more to so many more people because they'll be living through it for the very first time.
And it's crazy too. You wonder why there are so many Bills fans, even though the team has been terrible for a very long time. And it's because, as you mentioned, when you started getting the electronic boom of TVs and computers and all that stuff, that's really when the Bills were good. That's when kind of things started to, I guess they started to ramp up in the early like computer days and all that stuff. But you get to the point where they watched Kelly growing up. So now that they strive, they want to see that again. They want the next Jim Kelly, but at the same time, it's like, we keep getting beaten over the head with those teams. And it's great to see it. Don't get me wrong, because I feel like even though the Bills have been relatively bad for a very long time, they've got a very storied history for being a relatively bad team for most of the time, to be frank. But it's nice to be able to see Bills fans out there and see them celebrating, not just because they're Bills fans, but because they're Bills fans. They love the Bills, and the Bills are good. That feels very nice.
Right. It was always nice to see Bills fans supporting the team regardless, even in their crap years, but really to be rewarded with actual competent people in the offices and coaching staff. And because of that competency that they have, the team responds very well to it, and now there's a good team there. I mean, like, I vividly remember the good Bills teams. I lived through that. I was old enough to be 10, 11 years old playing football with my friends, and I was Andre Reed, and so I lived through that, and I remembered how the area was as a whole when the Bills were good, and they were constantly on TV or whatever. The area is so much better when the Bills are a good team, regardless of whatever, team fan you may be living in the area. When the Bills are doing good, the area is much happier and better. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
I agree wholeheartedly. And hey, you mentioned history. Well, we mentioned history, but you also mentioned a competent front office. Why not talk about Stephon Diggs, who, because of a competent front office, he's setting records this season. He had 9 receptions for 145 yards and 3 touchdowns on Monday Night Football. His 3 touchdowns tie a career high. He's the first Buffalo Bills since Stevie Johnson in 2010 to have 3+ receiving touchdowns in a game. His season reception.
You can't tell me that they weren't trying to up his touchdown total count because of the Devontae Adams talk of late.
It was pretty low.
Which I'm not going to take credit for that, because I post the whole question on Twitter and Facebook of, who's better, Devontae Adams or Stephon Diggs? And then now I'm hearing it all. I heard it all last week.
Brian Dable must follow your Twitter account.
I'm not taking credit for that, or I'm not saying they're having these conversations because of me, but I'm also not ruling it out. So I'm just saying, I think maybe they heard Trust the Podcast before, and we're like, you know what? Let's show that guy.
Hey, where there's smoke, there's fire. That's what they always say.
That's what I'm telling myself too.
So his season reception total moves to 120, and his season receiving yards total moves to 1,459. Both are single-season franchise records, and Diggs currently leads the NFL in both categories. He also becomes the 3rd player in the 51-year history of the AFC East to top 110 receptions and 1,400 yards in the same season. Marvin Harrison with the Colts in 1999 and Wes Welker with the Patriots in 2011 both did the same thing as well. His 50-yard touchdown reception in the game makes him the first Bill with a 50-plus yard touchdown reception in consecutive games since Terrell Owens did it in games 10 and 11 in 2009. Also, late last week, I don't know how you want to say it, whatever, it's irrelevant. He was named the AFC Player of the Week, the first Bills wide receiver, John, to win this award since Andre Reed did it back in Week 12 of the 1994 season. Wow.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, Andre Reed, the man I used to line up as and pretend I was. I had an Andre Reed jersey too, believe it or not.
Hey, you go watch TikTok. You can watch him throw himself through a table. It's great.
I don't think I could. Well, maybe I would do that. I don't know. That would involve downloading TikTok, and I think I'm a little too old for that.
That's okay. That's fair. Hey, also, Buffalo scored 5 touchdowns on Monday night. Why is that important? Because of the 4th time in franchise history that the Buffalo Bills have scored 50 or more touchdowns in a season. They scored 58 in 1991, 57 in 1975, and 53 in 1990. Also, 10 different receivers. Let's try that again. Catch a pass in the game, tying the team record for the most players catching a pass in a game. Now, John, moving on to our second of the 3 big things here. First off, as we always mention, because it continues to happen, the Buffalo Bills are offensively methodical. Again, they had 31 first downs recorded, marking the 15th consecutive game with 20-plus first downs. It furthers that franchise record previously set, but also they outpossessed New England 39 minutes and 41 seconds to only 20 minutes and 19 seconds. And on 4th down, the Buffalo Bills, I don't remember if the stat was that they didn't go for it a ton on 4th down, or they had like one of the lowest effectivenesses on 4th down. Either way, they were 3 for 3 on Monday night. Kind of funny because a New England reporter said how like the cockiness and the prickishness of the Patriots was transferred over to the Bills. And I thought that was pathetic because we all know the Patriots are a bunch of dicks and the Bills are just having a blast.
Well, okay, so here's what I say on that. So what? You know why? Because we've had to hear for 20 years, and I say we collectively as AFC East fans of AFC East teams, because I know I know Dolphins fans that share this same sentiment. Who cares? The Patriots are mad. If the Patriots, beat writers are mad, and they're talking about a team like Buffalo, quote unquote, because I heard this too, running the score up on them. Guess what has happened a number of times over the course of the past couple of years. Do you remember a few years ago when Rex Ryan was the head coach and Bill Belichick was having fun at Rex Ryan's expense? And one of their audible calls was Rex Ryan. And then he went to throw, and so he would yell, Rex Ryan, hut! And then he throws like a 2-yard pass that goes for a touchdown. Like, we've had to deal with that crap for 20 years. You people that in Patriots Nation can deal with that shit for 20 minutes.
You know what's really funny too? The old saying goes is, you're not paid. The Buffalo Bills are paid to score touchdowns. They're not paid to not score touchdowns. So it's your job to stop them. That's what you get paid for. And if you can't stop them, that's not your fault.
And that is exactly what the hoodie used to say when people would ask him, are you trying to run up the score or whatever? And he's like, we're trying to play football games and we're trying to win football games. Our job's to score. It's not our job to coddle people.
Absolutely.
So, pot meet kettle.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Couldn't say it better myself. Hey, couldn't say it better myself. The defense, 3 sacks, 5.5 tackles for loss. They held New England to 201 total yards, the second fewest of the season. They also allowed only 56 net passing yards, which is the fewest the Bills defense has allowed this season. Although the Bills did not come out unscathed, Cole Beasley, week to week with a leg injury. Josh Allen says he's chomping at the bit to get back. The Buffalo Bills have signed a wide receiver to the practice squad. They reportedly are interested in bringing in Kenny Stills to sign him to a deal, which would actually be a nice little I don't think Stills is washed. I mean, there's a reason why he wasn't effective in Houston, but then again, Houston is ineffective in its own right because the franchise is just a complete joke. So I certainly think it's not a bad move if the Bills bring in Kenny Stills. It can never hurt to have some quality depth, but not great news that Cole Beasley could potentially be out for multiple weeks. I'm sure he will not play on Sunday. We don't know. We'll talk about this in a minute. We don't know who's going to play on Sunday, but
it would be the wise thing for him to do not play on Sunday. It's a meaningless game to the Bills, and I know we're going to talk about the look ahead after the commercial break. It means so much more to the Dolphins, and their backs are already up against the wall anyways now coming into this week after what we learned about Fitzpatrick. So I would say probably err on the side of caution and just don't even bother suiting him up for week 17. Let him rest. You guys are in the playoffs. The East is clinched. Really don't play anybody. And if you end up beating Miami because they start Tua or they start a practice, squad wide receiver, so be it.
I mean, we're hearing rumors that Jake Fromm might play. So,
oh boy, Jake from State Farm.
The ultimate victory cigar right there.
I also want to go and make this my second week in a row. I want to apologize to the Buffalo Bills defense for shit talking you so much and telling people to drop you in fantasy football. I apologize. Keep doing your thing.
Absolutely. With that being said, we'll be right back after this quick break with more Trust the Podcast. And we're back here on Trust the Podcast, our third of the three big things this week, as always, as has become recently. Live look at the playoffs. Buffalo 12-3. The AFC East is clinched. No need to talk about that anymore. In the AFC, Kansas City 14-1 has clinched the 1 seed. Buffalo looking to clinch the 2 seed. Who'd have thunk it? They are 12-3 right now, sitting in the second spot. Pittsburgh 12-3 at 3. Tennessee 10-5. Miami 10-5. Baltimore 10-5. Cleveland 10-5. That will be shaken up, whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
After this week, we'll talk about that in just a moment. But if the season ended today, I was going to say, John, if the season ended today, Buffalo would host Cleveland, but I got a feeling those last 4 teams, really there are 5 teams at 10-5. Whole lot of something's going to be happening on Sunday, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
It's going to be great to watch, and I hate to say it because I like to see teams like, quite frankly, the Bills and Cleveland do very well and go and get into the playoffs or whatever. But the selfish part of me here is like, well, if Tampa Bay has already made the playoffs, right? And their last playoff, their playoff drought was from 2007 until just this year, right? Before that, or after that, would have been the New York Jets that have not had that would have not had or been at the playoffs the longest since 2011. Cleveland right now is the team that holds the longest playoff drought right now. 2002 was the last time they were in the playoffs. So if they lose, they are out, or maybe we'll need help. I'm not sure. But the point is that they actually have an opportunity to remind everybody that they're Cleveland and miss the playoffs. And then this season won't be a total and complete loss as a Jets fan, because at the very least we can say we still don't have the longest playoff drought anymore. So
there you go. I mean, you can hang on to it. Yeah, you can hang on to it. Our look ahead brought to you by 26 Shirts. You can check them out, 26shirts.com, facebook.com/26shirts, and at 26 Shirts on Twitter and Instagram. Week 17, John, we have made it to the end of the regular season. Sunday, January 3rd, the Buffalo Bills host the Miami Dolphins. Miami 10-5. They are 5-2 on the road, averaging 25.2 points per game, allowing 18.8 points per game. Now here, let me mention this. The win and in scenarios, Tennessee, Miami, Baltimore, and Cleveland, if they win, they're in. Indianapolis needs to win and get help. I'm not going to try to break down all the other scenarios because it gets very convoluted like a gigantic rat's nest. So essentially, Tennessee, Miami, Baltimore, and Cleveland, you win, you're in. The reason Tennessee's on the list because if Tennessee loses and Indianapolis wins and other teams win, there's a potential they could completely miss the playoffs. Don't know if that's going to happen, but you've got teams like Cleveland is going to be playing Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's going to be playing Mason Rudolph at quarterback. There's a potential that the Buffalo Bills could not be playing a lot of their starters for very long. So that really brings my only question here, because I was going to ask you about Tua Tagovailoa and Ryan Fitzpatrick having a fun time where Tua starts, Ryan Fitzpatrick finishes, but Ryan Fitzpatrick tests positive for COVID, and he will not be playing on Sunday, so that erases that question. So my question for you, John, the catch-22 here. Do you rest your starters and give Miami a better chance to win and make the playoffs, or do you risk it and play through to try to keep Miami out of the playoffs? Because here's the other fun part, is that say, for instance, if Buffalo loses, Pittsburgh wins, Cleveland's out, Miami's in, whatever, there's a potential for the Buffalo Bills to play Miami in Buffalo in back-to-back weeks. So it's a situation where
insane.
Do you cover your ass and say, look, because here's the thing. If Pittsburgh loses and Buffalo loses, Buffalo gets the 2 seed. So really either Buffalo wins or Pittsburgh loses and Buffalo loses. Either way, they get the 2 seed. So, which then you're essentially playing, I guess, like the weakest of the teams, but the AFC is pretty good this year. But I guess, John, what are your thoughts on this? What do you think about the catch?
My thoughts on that. Yeah, my thoughts on that would be it's very, very difficult historically to beat the same team 3 times in one season. If Buffalo beats Miami this week and then plays them again, that kind of essentially that knocks them out. They won't have to worry about playing them a third time.
It'd be very difficult.
But if Miami were to win this week and we'd have the rubber match, I don't know. I think that for the Bills, honestly, I would take the proverbial fall, if you will, using wrestling terminologies here. I'd take the pin, so to speak, and and rest the starters and be ready for game, the potential game 3 with them at full speed, hearts out, to try and win. Somehow they get in, somehow they end up playing, or even playing your hearts out and then losing the game somehow, and then they're in, and now your starters are all tired because they tried to play a meaningless to them game in week 17, and now they're tired going into week 18 playing the same game or playing the same team with the same coaches, same players that now have a full week of actually studying the film from just this past week to work with.
It's a very strange
game plan
scenario.
And play a completely different thing. It's a strange scenario. I think honestly, the Bills should just rest the starters and come into the playoffs with. If we had the bye week this year for the 1 and the 2 seed, that might be one thing that might change this answer, but we don't. The only bye week is going to be for Kansas City. So,
I mean,
I would
at this
say just
point,
rest the starters.
you look at it this way: you let Josh Allen go out and get that franchise record for most passing yards in a season for a franchise record, which I have to double check here. I don't remember. I'm just going to look it up really quick. I'm sorry. You let him out. You let him go out and get that record. You let him go out and get the records. You bench Stephon Diggs. You bench Josh Allen. I mean, with the running backs, you probably just continue to stick with Singletary and Moss, and you see what happens. Defensively, I don't really know. I think the Cole Beasley injury kind of spooked them, and rightfully so, because it would be nice to have that 2 seed. But I mean, if you look at it this way, if the Buffalo Bills are the 2 seed going to the playoffs and they win the wild card matchup, they're going to host another playoff game.
Right.
So it's a situation where that 2 seed is very important, because really the only time you'll have to travel in the playoffs would be for an AFC championship game in Kansas City, if that were to happen, or the Super Bowl, which everyone has to travel for the Super Bowl. So to point out here real quick too, Drew Bledsoe 2002 had 4,359 passing yards. This year, Josh Allen has 4,320. So you could obtain that on a drive if you wanted to.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I think let him get it, let him get that, and then just, go for it from there.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I want to see the win with help scenario that you have here with Indianapolis. Kind of want to see the old man Rivers get in.
Well, because he did mention too that there's a potential that he could retire after this, if this could be his last game, which to me seems crazy because, I mean, he's old, but I thought he had a little more gas left in the tank. But I guess if you leave the Chargers and you realize that I gave it one good shot and it didn't work out, so that's it for me. I mean, if that's the case, then that's the case.
Well, I would argue that either way, regardless of what happens with him, it's a much higher note to go out than he would have in Los Angeles.
Absolutely,
potentially losing his starting gig to Justin Herbert. So, he was the starter pretty much through and through in Indianapolis. He had them in contention. They're playing good ball. He's
a Hall of Fame
happened to
quarterback.
be that team.
Yeah, he's a Hall of Famer.
Of course. I would have loved to have seen Phil, Uncle Phil, as I call him. I would have loved to have seen Uncle Phil get a chip. I was
going to say, I think
at the very least, if he could get back into the playoffs, that would be acceptable. I think
he's the best quarterback right now. Sorry, John. I'm very excited about this. I'm very passionate about Phil Rivers.
No, go ahead. I
think he's the best quarterback to not win a championship actively right now, and one of the best, I would say, to never win ever. But I'd have to look at that list to verify.
I would say I would argue that he is this generation's Dan Marino.
That's fair. I would say that's pretty fair.
Yeah, because
it sucks that he never even got a chance. That really sucks.
Not in terms of like the record in the record-setting pace, but to have that label. You know what I mean?
Dan Marino,
somebody
a better actor,
who was what? I'm sorry, Dan Marino, but what?
Dan Marino's a better actor, though.
Yeah, a better actor. Yeah,
if we're comparing like best quarterback to not win a Super Bowl between Dan Marino and Phil Rivers, like Dan Marino went to the Super Bowl, Phil Rivers didn't. Dan Marino's better actor, Phil Rivers isn't, but Phil Rivers has I guess for lack of a better explanation, he's very good at making children. So I guess that probably puts him over the top. I'm not sure.
He's also an amazing trash talker too, because he talks trash, but does not swear, which makes it even funnier. Because
it's almost embarrassing to get trash talked by someone like that.
Right, you get trash talked by him. It's like you're getting trash talked by, I don't know.
It's like when your dad talks trash to you, and you're just like, I feel.
Well, no, if my dad talks trash to me, he's F-bombing me. But
sure, mine too, probably. Yeah, let's be honest.
I'm very sure Randy would be F-bombing you if you were talking trash.
Absolutely, you know him just as well as I do.
I do. Well, I can't say that.
That's one of those in the hopper, ready to go. Drop it on you like an atom bomb.
Oh yeah. I could tell you I've heard your father drop an F-bomb on air before.
Just a few, yeah, just a few. I've lost count, but one thing I want to ask you before we wrap up the podcast today, I forgot to write it into the notes, but they did announce a plan to allow 6,700 people into Bills Stadium for the wild card matchup. Apparently, along the lines of if you go to that game, you have to test before and after. There's contact tracing, the social distancing, no tailgating. If you go to the Bills wildcard game and they win, knock on wood, that they should, and then the Bills host a divisional matchup, you will not be eligible to go to the divisional matchup just because obviously it would create some sort of potential contamination issue, which I totally understand that. Plus, just being a level of fairness, there are 70,000 seats and a bunch of ticket holders, and those who didn't opt out get the chance to buy the tickets, which I'll tell you what, I'd love to go to a playoff game. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, of course.
I'm not trying to freeze my ass off in January in Orchard Park. Like if and when the Bills build a dome, you'll see my ass in those seats. Right now, not a chance. Mm-hmm. You can call me what you want.
Do you really think they would actually build a dome?
There have been we've had this. It's like an ongoing discussion between a group of friends where we think that they're going to build a stadium downtown, kind of near in like the arena district, if you will. But I don't think. I think if they're going to build a stadium, if they're not going to if they Arrowhead Stadium build stadium, where they essentially remodel on the fly, I don't think so. But if they build a brand new stadium, it would be idiotic to not build a dome, I think.
I would say retractable roof, if anything. You know what I mean?
That's kind of like I just think it's the direction it's going.
It's absolutely the direction it's going. But the thing, I think, part of the luster of Buffalo coming to Orchard Park to playing, or coming up to Buffalo to play, even going back as far as the War Memorial Stadium days, was the weather, the element. I mean, like Buffalo has largely been compared to Green Bay many, many times. Similar passionate fan base, similar weather affecting the game kind of thing. You know what I mean? But I mean, if it's like bad, or you want to host a Super Bowl or a WrestleMania or major concerts or something, yes, you have that retractable roof on there, like the Falcons have on their stadium, and you can do those things. Or if it's just horrendous out, then you put the thing on. But if you want to keep bring back the elements and go back old school, you keep that thing open, you let that place get snowy. I mean, that would be dope. So
I wonder if they might end up doing something like what they have in, I guess Seattle's probably a little too open, but Miami is really, I mean, and they only really renovated. They kind of cut down to the bare bones and rebuilt it, because my thought being that in the future, they're probably going to want to put an MLS team in Buffalo. That would be logical, but you need somewhere to play, a new stadium. Right. I don't know that Buffalo would be in the running to host a Final Four, but you would be able to have the facility to host college basketball games, big concerts. Yeah, that's true. Soccer.
Can I just put out there too, since we're talking about all these upgrades and all those wonderful things? NBA Commissioner Adam Silver threw out there that he is considering opening up a few more teams for expansion. And besides wanting the Seattle Supersonics to come back, that being one of them, I really, 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 truly believe that not just Buffalo, but even Rochester, one of these two cities could support an NBA team again. And I would love to see an NBA team in Buffalo.
I agree. I know this is a BLTD conversation most likely, but who cares? It's our podcast. We do whatever we want. There's always been a discussion among people in Buffalo whether or not they thought that the city could handle multiple professional sports franchises. I mean, there was discussion back in the day, back in the 60s, that Buffalo was going to host a Major League Baseball team, and it obviously never panned out. But things like that, where you see how Toronto comes and I mean, granted it was a COVID season and nobody was in the stands, but like the city can handle professional sports perfectly fine.
Absolutely.
The Sabres aren't great, but they've got a decent facility. The Bills, they need a new stadium, but where are they going to build it? That's the question. I mean, I think that there's enough of a soccer fan base that they could probably get away with an MLS team with no problem. Mm-hmm. I think the discussion for NBA expansion, it starts with Seattle. There's no way they expand the NBA without putting a team in Seattle. And I think even before they rebuilt the Key Arena, now it's the Climate Pledge Arena or whatever it's called. Before they even rebuilt that arena, I think that was the discussion, because Seattle, if you go read about it, and not you, John, but other people listening, Seattle got screwed out of the Supersonics because they wanted to put a team in Oklahoma City and somebody had a ton of money.
Right. And they were close to having the Sonics return because there was an ownership group that was looking to buy the former Rochester Royals, aka Sacramento Kings now. Yep. And they were considering relocating Sacramento to Seattle to become the Supersonics.
And if baseball fans can't put into perspective, it's essentially the tease of putting a team back in Montreal. That's how big Seattle. Right. And honestly, I think honestly, I might get some hate in my Twitter account, but I honestly think that like Seattle coming back, NBA coming back to Seattle is bigger than baseball coming back to Montreal. And I think baseball coming back to Montreal is a pretty big freaking deal because, the Supersonics, they kept their history. You know how that stuff always is weird to me. How like we take your team, but you leave the history, and we're just a brand new team. I don't understand it, but
well, it's what the Cleveland Browns did when they moved to Baltimore. Same thing.
Yeah, I don't get it. Like, it's weird. That stuff is so weird to me, how it's like semantics. It's like, who gives a damn? Yes, I don't care. Yes. Just give me a damn team. But I agree with you. Basketball in the area, I think I would be a bigger basketball fan if there were basketball in the area. Because college basketball, I guess, I don't know about you, it doesn't really do it for me. But again, if there's so much of a landscape for sports in Buffalo, it just is kind of an untapped thing because it costs money to have a stadium. It costs money to build a stadium. It costs money to own a franchise. And I mean, aside from Terry Pagula, there aren't that many people in Buffalo who either can or are willing to put themselves out there to own a professional franchise. So I guess it's a situation where you kind of cross that bridge when you get there. But I think
I'll tell you what, trust the podcast, people. Fingers crossed for me. If I can somehow strike it rich and become a billionaire within the next 5 to 10 years, I will totally use my influence to buy advertisements to tell them to bring a team there.
You know what you would do? You would buy a team and then you'd go acquire all the Ball family and even the dad, and then you would just refer to them always as the Balls.
I would not bring those guys there. But I would tell you,
you literally would do it. I know you. You literally would do it just so you could refer to them as the Balls, and you'd giggle every time you did it.
I could be. I'm getting the evil eye right now from my daughter. So to take a line from my late great friend Huber, you know what that means.
Yeah, my dad's calling me too. Good timing. So with that being said, I'm Ryan Wolfe at Wolfe BLTD. John is at IamJCMoney on Twitter. We are Trust the Podcast.
You are not.
We will catch you sometime very soon, talking playoffs, talking the Buffalo Bills. And as always, fuck 2020. Welcome to 2021. Go Bills.
ProWrestlingTees.com/Brody Lee. Get a shirt. 100% of the profits go to Amanda, Brody, and Nolan. Godspeed, my man.
The preceding presentation has been brought to you by the Gear Network.